Good morning, everyone. I am Massimiliano, Max. I'm the moderator of the session, and I am the first speaker of this session. So I'll introduce myself. I'm going to present about an analysis that we have done at the Internet Society about differences in data between Internet routing registries and their databases and related databases. So I start with a question. Can we still trust the Internet routing registries? And this is a question that we came up with before we started the investigation. So why am I asking this question? Because there are more than 30 different databases. And each one of them has different ways of handling the data. There are different aspects of this data we can look at. There are the ones that are run by the regional Internet registries. You should be familiar with the RIPE database and its associated routing registry. But then there are other databases. There's RADB, there's AltDB, there's NTT, Level 3. There's a plethora of them. And each one of them contains different types of data. And they have different trust levels that can be assured. So why do we need this data? We needed to build prefix lists. We need them to increase routing security. We needed to have a source of data where we can say who is supposed to be announcing a certain network. And we can translate this into router configuration that makes our connectivity, the internet, more secure. So we build prefix lists, we have tools, we take, these tools have to rely on some certain data sources. But can we trust the IRRs about their data? Can we trust that? Do we have to add additional layers of security around them? Well, sometimes the IRRs have controls that are really a bit lax. You know, I used to go to the stadium when I was a kid, when I was a little younger, and this is the kind of security that you could find at the stadium in Italy. And this was a good representation of certain security mechanisms that certain IRRs apply. Do you have a maintainer? Yes, okay, well, you can create objects. If there's no one else no other object already covering the address space you want to create one for, I'll let you do that. And they do so for certain reasons. They can't in certain circumstances figure out if you're the legitimate holder of some address space or not. So this is what happens. This is an example of mine. I have my own LIR, I have my own address space, I have a /29, IPv6, and as you can see on the top left, there is an object. That's the one that I have created. You see it as my own maintainer. That's my surname, Stucchi-MNT. But there is an object in RADB that someone else created for me. And I'm not going to delete it. I always use that as an example. It's another ISP where I went to at one point to announce part of the address space that I have in my IPv6 allocation, and they created a route object for me in another database. I didn't do that. Someone else proxy registered that for me. But that, in the end, doesn't represent what I am doing there totally, fully. And if I want to take ownership of that, I can't. I just would have to ask someone to delete that object. So when you try to create a prefix list for my address space, for my ASN, you would always see that /32 popping up. It is not harmful at the moment. It might be harmful in the future, but it's there. And someone had the chance to just create that for me. So this can be good and bad at the same time, but it's an example of how things can get complicated real quick. Because I have I have a very simple allocation, but imagine a situation where you have ISPs with a larger number of allocations, and keeping track of objects that were not created by you in other databases can be complicated. I recently had to help figure out a situation where on a route server, on an internet exchange where I help people run it, there was someone claiming that some networks were filtered out of their own announcements. And then while we investigated, we found out that everything was fine in the RIPE database, but in RADB there were other objects that pointed to a different ASN originating the same prefix, and that was being filtered out by the routing software at that point. So there might be cases where you need to look into different databases to figure out where the truth is. So we teamed up, a few of us, small team, me, Amrish, Poker, and Aftab Siddiqui, and we started discussing about, let's have a look at what the differences are between different databases. Is the truth most seen in the IRRs, or is it most seen in the other databases? So we took the chance to look into the comparison between the RIPE registry and AltDB and RADB, and RN and RADB and AltDB. So we compared them to see where we could find most of the truth. So what did we find? This is just some preliminary data. We still have to investigate it a bit deeper, but here is the initial point. When you look at red, it's when we have two records, one in the regional registry and one in RADB, for example, where the origin ASN doesn't match. When you see green is when you have only an object in the RIR, and when you see orange, those are objects that are matching between the RIR and RADB. Now, why is that orange? And let me move on to showing you the RIPE region only, because the global stats are actually polluted a little bit by ARIN, who has a series of different, more objects than needed that show up in their dump. So when I look at this, I can tell you that there's a large percentage of objects that don't match between the two databases. There's a small portion in IPv4 that are matching objects, and I was focusing on that. Why did we put it in orange or yellow instead of just green, saying everything's good? Because, similarly to my case, if there are two objects in two different databases, even if they match now, you cannot assure that tomorrow, when you want to change something, you will be able to change it in both databases, or you'll have to keep track of changing it in both databases. So that's still a situation where you might want to look into what's the database that's not your regional registry and delete that object. And as you can see, we have a large percentage of objects that are not matching between the RIPE database and RADB at the moment. It's a quarter of the amount of objects. Then there's a small percentage where they're matching, and the good news is that in IPv4 we have a large part of objects that are fine only in the RIR, and IPv6 has a much better situation because, being more recent, it doesn't suffer from all the legacy objects or legacy space that could be in other databases. Now, if we look at the non-authoritative database from RIPE, things are somehow a little better. Some of them are only in the RIR, but this is a database you should not trust by default, because new objects cannot be created in this source, but still a quarter of them people should take a look at, because they're either not matching or they have two different objects there. So anyway, anything in ripe non-authoritative should be deleted. But why did we put it up here? It's because we discovered when we were building part of the libraries behind this software, I took a country in Africa. I took Mauritius as an example for working out if the code was okay. Because Amrish, my colleague, is from there, and he knows the landscape a bit. And it took me a while to figure out why my software didn't seem to work right. Because we couldn't find anything in the in Afrinic about the networks in Mauritius. And we found out that most of the route objects for networks in Mauritius were still created in the ripe non-authoritative database. And they don't have anything in Afrinic, which is a bit troublesome at this point. So we started getting in touch with them to see if they could fix the situation. And you can see that almost the same situation applies to IPv6. So we have the same type of data. Now, AltDB is a better story. They don't have much data in there, and so AltDB, we just decided to take it and put it aside. It doesn't have valuable data we can use. But then after this, we started looking at taking the part. Remember, in the ripe region, there was almost a quarter of the route objects who were not matching between the ripe database and RADB. So we took that part and we started comparing it with what's in the routing table. So as you can see, there's about a sixth of those objects who have a match that is in RADB. So what is announced, what is actually announced, matches what is in RADB rather than what is in the IRR. And for IPv6, it's even worse. There's more matching RADB than what is, there's more compared to IPv4 than what is matching the RADB source. So this is something that we would like to check with those who are making these kind of announcements, and it's something that we've planned to do in 2023, get in contact with all these people and see how we can help them fix it. So what are the next steps for us? The idea was to further analyze this, go per ASN, per country, and we haven't done it yet. Comparing with RPKI, we get basically the same exact data. It's lined out because we get the same exact data we got in the previous slide, where I showed you the announcer, the comparison with the BGP announcements. So that's done for the moment. And then in the future, we would like to have a way to analyze also AS sets. So have a way to check the customer cone of a certain AS to see how much of that compares with the different databases. And then what are the recommendations, the key takeaways we can have here? It's better to rely on the regional registries because they can apply more controls on who can create objects, but this is a given. Encourage the use of RPKI because RPKI gives you just 5 big repositories where you find all the correct data and they're more controlled. And then register your AS sets and make sure that these comply and do that in one database and use the hierarchical system. And I'll talk about this more later today in my next presentation. And then there is a recommendation that we gave to legacy space holders to IRRs and legacy space holders, because in some cases, in some regional registries, you cannot, if you have legacy space that was handed out way before the regional registry existed, you cannot have RPKI services, or you cannot, in some cases, even create route objects in the IRR database, and that is creating certain issues. So data is available. We provide it to everyone. It's generated on the 1st and on the 15th of every month. And if you want to access it, there's a link on the slide, which are already published on the agenda, on the website. All the data is in JSON, so you can take it and use your favorite way to analyze that. And it's there, and if you want, we are available. There's my email address, other ways to reach me. We are available as a small group to provide you with the data related to your ASN if you're interested, if you want to see how clean that data is, how much of that is in one database compared to another. And so if you would like to get in touch with us to see this data for us to help you with it, feel free. And I'm happy to take any questions at the moment. Good, yeah. Yeah, we have, oh.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Max. I have so many comments that I even don't know where to start. So thank you very much for putting this together. My name is Bernd Spies, working for DKIC, so I have to do with all this filter madness day by day. So I have a lot of customers who have an enormous amount of IRR databases used. So I see customers using up to 10 different IRRs because this has a, I don't know, 20 years history where people like this database or the other one, nobody knows that all this is existing. I have customers where the cleanup would take years until they find out what has been done and what is really true. So I really liked your suggestion also to use authorized databases, because sometimes I even see customers who have some kind of automatism to load data into RUTB even for peering partners where they believe it is a good idea to make root object for the prefixes of the peering partners or whatever. So I have a lot of tasks to force delete of data from other databases, so this is really a mess. And one last comment, maybe it is also a good idea to think of stop using more specifics, because if you have, let's say, a /14, you can decide to have one root, or you can decide to have 1,000 roots. And if you create 1,000 roots, okay, then you have most probably 1,000 entries, what somebody has to maintain. And I can tell you, I don't think that anyone maintains all that stuff, what is put in that databases. So, not really a question, but a few comments. Mm-hmm. But thanks for taking care.
Thank you. Thank you for the comments. Are there any other questions or other comments? I see Hisham.
Hisham Ibrahim, Ripe NCC. Thanks, Max, for the talk. Quick question from my side. Have you looked into the people that are using these different databases and see stuff like habits of deaggregation versus aggregation, and there's the CIDR lists of people that are like you aggregating and polluting. Do you see any correlations between those in the use of these databases or not?
No, I haven't done this directly. I think AFTAB did it for a couple of countries in APAC, and I think he did see some correlation between this data. Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thanks.
Thank you. Now I'm worried.
Nishal Gobadan, no hats. Thanks, Max. I missed the first part, so apologies if I ask something you've covered already. But there are some registries that are quite restrictive in what they're allowed to add. And you're also dealing with the fact that you may end up with customers that don't necessarily have the time, patience, I don't want to say knowledge, I just say lack of time and patience to register this. And sometimes it's the transit provider having to register objects for them. So then things like RADD make absolute sense. What do you think is a better solution for that?
I don't have a final solution for that. Like one of the recommendations we put here is to use the IRR as much as you can, because then they can provide the rightful authentication. But the final one would be, let's all move to RPKI, where we can be sure that the data there is more genuine. And I would recommend more of that than than fixing all this. Where in some cases, as was mentioned by Bernd, some operators have thousands of different route objects. And for example, Aftab gave a slightly different presentation at other events where he showed like the biggest offenders, let's call them this way, and we can generate that data to see who has the most differences between databases, but I decided not to do that here because I don't like naming and shaming on presentations. But we do have the way to check that, and I would still recommend going for RPKI as the ultimate way.
So my own experience as an internet exchange point operator with RPKI is that most of the routes that I see rejected are rejected because they become more specifics that somebody has just forgotten to enter a row of 4. I'm not sure that RPKI is going to be the final solution. I'm not saying it's a bad solution. I'm just saying that, for the operator community, I still meet people that don't know what RPKI is, even though it's, 10 years old now. And that's a long time coming. I have one more question that I want to sneak in before I give the mic to Chad. And that is the comment about legacy address space. One of the problems I hear in my region is that people that have legacy address space don't want to embrace RPKI or user hours because they're unaware of the costing that's attached to them. Obviously, the benefit of being a legacy member is that you have resources before the IRR system, and you don't pay for those resources, at least not at the same rate if you are paying than others. Are you aware of concerted efforts by the IRRs to help debunk that in their respective areas? And isn't that something that could help?
I know the situation is changing in Arin, but I see maybe Natalie has. But I don't know of anything happening at Afrinic about this.
Yes, I can comment a little bit on that because legacy varies per region in the uptake of RPKI. For example, in the RIPE region, we're lucky that over 80% of the legacy holders has signed at least a contract with us so they can use RPKI. I know Erin is very actively now also onboarding legacy customers. Is customers the right word? No. Legacy holders.
For Arin, they call them customers.
Yeah. Now, I'm not really sure where Afrinic is with this for. So the question is what the RIPE NCC membership does. It's very weird talking that way. Well, so for the RIPE NCC, if you are a legacy holder, you can just contact the registration team, lar-help@ripe.net, and they will help you on board to get access to RPKI, signing a contract for that. But basically, it's also about fair use and things like that. So, in that respect, we don't get that many questions. We hear the question a lot from people outside our region asking how RPKI and legacy space are doing together. But in our region, for our registration team, we don't get those questions a lot because a lot of the legacy users are already onboarded. Okay.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Natalie. Thanks, Nishal. Now.
Hi, Max. Good morning. Jad, RIPE NCC. Silly question, maybe. Did you take a look at the timestamp on the mismatches, the objects that mismatch? Is there a trend there? Is it a relic of the past? Did it happen 10 years ago and they are still there, or is it like spread across time?
We did, Aftab did it for a few countries in APAC, and we did see that the timestamps have a big difference usually. So what is in say RADB is much older than what you find in the RIR. So that suggests that it might be address space that was once held by an organization, given back to the registry, and then reallocated to someone else. So that suggests that. But we haven't looked at the global numbers in that sense.
And is that also consistent with the stuff that you said you compared what is happening in BGP
with the stuff that mismatch between two. Does that also apply there?
That one we didn't check. I just checked with a dump of the fib at one point.
Okay, and one last question, which basically circles back on this. Is there commonality between all of these networks or ASs that have mismatch objects here and there? Like, are they appearing in specific locations where they are forced to create objects here but not there, or something like this?
That one we haven't looked into, but it's something that we could do at one point.
All right. Okay.
I don't have an answer for that at the moment.
All right. See you at the next IETF.
Yes. Well, thank you. There seem to be no more questions, and we are running a little bit late on time. So, thank you. So now we have the next talk by Ruben van den Brink about the idea he has about exchanges. And the presentation is titled, Be the Exchange You Want to See in This World. And so hopefully